A very good evening to our viewers. Thank you for joining us tonight on the evening review. My name is Toivan Jabela. Tonight on the platform, we are joined by Vali Roo. He is a practitioner, a retired practitioner in the space of agriculture, but also a commentator on many things related to agriculture. And tonight he's on the show to help us look into the situation at Meatco and related topics. Thank you very much, Vali, for making time. It's really a pleasure to have you here. You've been reading what has been reported, especially in Namibian Sun for the past week now, about this push by cabinet to bring back the CEO of Meatco, Mr. Wilima Mushoko Banji, whose contract actually ended already in January, but there's now a relentless effort to bring him back. Your reading of the situation.
Okay, the topic that you've just touched on, anyone interested in the news, anyone with some interest in farming, cattle, etc., would have read the story even since last year.
Yeah.
Now, basically what happened last year, the push came around about July, August to reappoint the CEO at that time when his contract was terminated in the end of January. Now, one has to go back to this. How does the decision making around the CEO works to understand the whole situation? First of all, Meatco, or the Meat Corporation of Namibia, is guided by the Meat Corporation of Namibia Act 1 of 2021. It came into force on the 3rd of May 2021. It was subsequently amended in 2004 at the end of December 2004.
2004 or 2024?
2004.
Because you said it was enacted in
amended in 2004. The
Okay.
Act of 2001 was amended in 2004. Minor adjustments that they've made into the Act, yeah. But now you have to look at the Act specifically, and I just want to take out a few points here. One concerning the Board of Directors, then submissions by matters to the Minister, the CEO specifically, and the liquidation of the corporation. Now, one must remember that the Parliament is the ones, they are the lawmakers. So they do make the laws. Meaning, if it is signed by the President, eventually this is then the law, and you cannot go against the law. Now, the same Parliament who were responsible for the Meat Corporation Act is now trying to step around the provisions of the Act. Let me give you a few ideas just to make it simple. If you look at the definitions, for instance, it says the board means the board of the corporation to be appointed by the minister. Okay? And the CEO, I'll come to that, means being appointed by the board.
Yes.
It's not a discrepancy, that's how the law is. If you look at the composition of the law, there are certain number of people from certain interest groups. And what they have to do, let's say for instance, one person from a certain group, then you have to submit to the minister 2 names, which the minister then have the prerogative to pick one of the 2. Okay? And then that selected few will then constitute the board. They also decide the chairperson, and they then appoint the chief executive officer. That's by law. Meaning, it's nothing to do with cabinet. It's the minister and the board.
So the minister appoints the board, and the board
appoints the CEO.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now, in this case, one of your papers also carried that story where the new Minister of Agriculture also said that you have to reappoint the same person. You will not find that provision anywhere in this Meatco Act, meaning he may not appoint or reappoint the person. He can advise the board. Let's get to that provision. It says, I'm going to read it to you. It's a little bit, you have to understand this, the wording. And any act is about the interpretation. Okay, it says, the board shall, at the request of the minister, or may in its own accord, submit to the minister in his or her cognizance any matter relating to performance of the functions of the board in terms of this act. So there's a communication provision between the minister and the board. Then it says, on the receipt of any matter submitted under subsection 1, the one that I've just mentioned, the minister may. The word is may. Make such recommendations to the board with regard to the manner in which the matter is to be dealt with as the minister thinks fit. May. He doesn't have to, or she doesn't have to, but they may do that. Then, number 3 under this section says, before taking a decision on any matter submitted under subsection 1 that I've read, the board shall have due regard to the recommendation made by the minister under this previous subsection. It does not say they have to. They can say, we've taken your advice into consideration, but we disagree with you. That's the provision of the board.
So essentially the buck stops with the board essentially on that matter.
Yes.
And that seems to be the suggestion value of I mean, if you read the article in Namibian Sun today,
Correct.
Based on the legal advice of the Attorney General, he tells former Minister Ipumbushimi exactly the same, to say that is a prerogative of the board. Cabinet has no right whatsoever to be the deciding force in a matter like that. But there seems to be this relentless. I think the new minister knows very well that he doesn't have the right to do that. Cabinet knows that there's no law that allows them to do that. So what seems to be the issue here? Why are they pushing on? Do you foresee other third forces behind this whole thing, or what is your reading of the situation?
I'll answer you on that one just now. Let's just go back to the provisions of the Act. Again, according to your article today, the legal advice that they got specifically would have told the minister, they shall have regard, but they don't have to listen to you. Okay? Now, in this case, I think the minister don't understand this specific wording. Shall have due regard does not mean you have to do something. Okay? Secondly, I can only speculate why the specific drive to put a person back in place whose contract was terminated after the 5 years, not renewed, but now suddenly the cabinet wants to reappoint the person. It started last year already with the cabinet informing the then Minister of Finance to start the whole process, which he actually did not do because he also got some legal advice on the issue. Now, if you are a lawmaker and you make a law like this MICO Act, how can you go against your own law that you've made? You cannot do that, except if you change the Act. Just to give you an idea, later on in the Act, it talks about the liquidation of the corporation. And it says specifically, the corporation shall not be wound up except by or under authority of an Act of Parliament. Meaning you can only wind MIDCO up by another Act. So if they want to appoint this person and take the decision making away from the board, they have to change the Act. But under the current circumstances, they are against their own Act.
There's a lot of speculation, Vali, around. In fact, what has been reported in the media lately is also that perhaps one of the reasons why Ipumbushimi was not reappointed is because he was sold to the president as by some people with their own reasons to paint him as this man who is in the pocket of white farmers, or that he's advancing the white agenda in the company, and the CEO, Mr. Mushoka Banji, is seen as is being packaged as the force that is fighting against this white capture, if you like. And it seems the appointing authority swallowed these versions hook, line, and sinker, to the extent that now we have the minister has been removed, and now the cabinet of Netumona Ndaitwah is pushing for Mr. Mushoka Banji to return. What is your reading of those particular dynamics that are being put around? Do we have a white capture at Midco?
No.
You've worked there in some
no.
capacity?
It's a question of, I'll get to that a little bit later. It's a question of, if you want to sustain an abattoir, you need cattle.
Yeah.
And if you look at the statistics, during the past 5 years, it was dwindling figures all the time. So what's wrong? Something's wrong. But I'll get to that. Just to come back to the Act, doesn't matter how you paint the previous Minister of Finance. I think he was well aware of the fact that I, as a minister, cannot overstep the Act. And that's why they said he refused. I don't know if he refused, but he didn't act on that. And to my mind, he was absolutely correct. To make him a scapegoat is the total wrong way of doing the things. He's not the problem. It was the people originally behind the story from cabinet.
Yeah.
The question should be asked, why does they want him back? There are certain things, and but that's more of politics, but if you face these things with emotion or a political eye or any sentiment, you will get nowhere.
Yeah.
So if you leave that out and you come back to the Act, then this is the law.
Yeah.
So you have to abide by the law. And that's currently full stop.
Yeah. And on white capture, you don't want to comment on that. You said you'll engage me on that because that is a speculation. Do you think that the racial lines are drawn as far as Midco is concerned? Black farmers feeling that the company is not representing them well, and white farmers thinking that this is historically their property. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay. If you go back to the Act again and you look at the definition of a member of Midco, they have sort of watered it down and amended the Act in 2004 to give even a person, a producer with one cattle being delivered to the abattoir, a vote.
Yeah.
So they try to accommodate every producer inside that. And then also when you look at the specifics of the board of directors, if you look at the composition, again in 2004, they made more and more provision for especially, let's say, the previously disadvantaged farmers, the upcoming farmers, the communal farmers, or whatever, to give them more and more representation in the decision making of the corporation. So in that matter, if you look at the people who are on the board and you talk about white capital, you must be colorblind, to my mind.
Do you think then that because there's also this idea that somehow, I mean, you spoke about the declining numbers of, you said of supplies to the abattoirs. Can you engage me broadly on that?
Maybe I should just take you back 5 years. Let's just see what happened in the past 5 years and what eventually panned out till where we are today. If you look at the CEO in question, he was appointed in early 2020 when the previous CEO left the company. or he already left 2017, it was Rikoro. And then only in 2020 they appointed the
Substantive.
CEO in question. Then he was told in July 2024 that the board will not renew his contract when it expires in 2025. Now the whole story started in August 2024 when the cabinet instructed the Minister of Finance, or actually it was called the Minister of Finance and Public Enterprises.
Yes.
During that time, they instructed him to reappoint the CEO. Now, the reason for the public enterprise included under finance, if you look at the Ministry of Public Enterprises, it was specifically created in 2015 with a minister because of the dismal performances of the state-owned enterprises, to get them on the same page. And he, in 2022, sort of got it all together, and then they disbanded the ministry and moved the portfolio under finance.
Yes.
So we have now, in this year, what will happen now, like before 2015, every state-owned enterprise reported to a line minister. Then it was Public Enterprises Ministry, then Ministry of Finance to include them, and now this year again, it will go out to the line ministries. That is the latest. Therefore, we have now got the Ministry of Finance and Social Grants.
Yes.
Now, what happened to Meadco in the past 5 years? What you've read, you can read it in any media. Financial problems and losses, every time in the news. Government bailouts. Producers not paid on time due to cash flow problems. The broken trust between producers and Meadco as an entity. A decrease in slaughter numbers. This is not an exhaustive list, I can give you more. Now, if you look at the reported figures of just government bailouts, 2021 to 2023, plus minus 700 million. 24, 25, more than 310 million. In this year's budget, an additional 100 million. This is far beyond $1 billion. And remember, this is taxpayer money.
Yeah.
It brings to my mind, the scenario of Air Namibia. It's a bottomless pit.
Yeah.
That's how it seems. Now, the question here, was that the correct management style? Remember, figures don't lie. Now, the question also is, why do they want to reappoint the CEO? I'm not looking for an answer, I'm just asking a question. What's going to happen in this year? There are 2 new abattoirs who will get onto the bandwagon of exports, namely the Rehoboth Abattoir 1 and Savannah Beef. Now, the government already acknowledged the competition that is coming. And the first step that they did was last year in September, when they said the lucrative Norway beef quota should only be divided by Meadco, who's going to get 75%, and Beefcor, a small portion of 25%. And this will go on for 5 years, meaning new entrants are not allowed for this lucrative quota, meaning it's a desperate lifeline for Meadco. Now, the problem here is not so much the market.
Yeah.
They can give 100% to Meadco, it doesn't matter. But any export abattoir needs sufficient throughput to effectively service your export market. And this is where the competition is going to be this year. As soon as these 2 are on the bandwagon of export markets, the competition will be inside the country for local cattle.
Oh, yeah.
And that is where the problem will start for Meadco. If their structure is not in place, it'll go backwards and backwards and backwards. Because the other abattoirs, if you read even in your newspaper, it was reported, Rehoboth never said they wanted a piece of the quota, the same as Savannah. They anticipated this is what the government going to do, and the marketing plan was around that. But there are only so many cattle in this country. And that's where the competition will come from, and the weak one will lose.
Yeah.
Okay, you see? And that's why we can ask these questions. Our new president, she came on a ticket to government, no corruption, service delivery, etc., etc. But according to your article, she was also aware of the legal opinion,
Yes.
and she's silent on that. I don't want answers, I just want to
No,
pose
it's
the
true.
question.
No, it's
Why?
it's a fair question. It's a fair
Yeah.
question. That is why we highlighted in our story that the current president, when she was vice president, she was actually alerted.
Plus
to-
the previous president as well.
Yes. Because Ipumbushimi went to Nangolo Mbumba to say, I'm stuck in this instruction of cabinet, which I don't think is legal, but can I solicit a legal opinion from the Attorney General? Nangolo Mbumba gave him his blessing,
Correct.
and the outcome of that was Mbumba is aware of it, Netumana Nyandaitwa is aware of it. So for her government now to be doing these things when she knows there's the Attorney General is not just a lawyer, it's not a private lawyer, it's a state attorney
Correct.
whose opinion ought to be respected. But there's no counter opinion, as far as I know, that might be contradicted to what the AG said. So on what basis then does the new government continue with this basis? But talk to me about this competition. I mean, what is happening in the beef industry right now? You have more major players now. You have Beefco, you have Savannah, you have Midco itself. How is the competition playing out in this space? Because I mean, you spoke about liquidation earlier, where you say the act of Midco doesn't allow liquidation. There has to be another law passed
Correct.
in order for that to happen. Because one of the things that are being said is that, you know, there's this cartel that wants Midco wiped off the face of earth so that private players can take over that space. And these are predominantly white companies if you, in the eyes of many. And it's people having this perception that maybe it's white farmers wanting to capture the entire industry at the expense of black farmers. Just if you can reflect on the structures of the beef industry right now.
Okay. Maybe to put it to you this way, the reason why all these other, let's say, private entities are mushrooming, it's because of inefficiency of Midco. If you look at the past annual reports, every time it looks worse. Every time it looks worse. Now, if you look at Midco per se, you cannot just kill Midco off like in Namibia. There's a strategic place for Midco in the country to assist a certain portion of the farmers or the producers. So they need to be there. But that doesn't mean you have or you can be inefficient. Okay? The others, they are okay. Now they are mushrooming on their own, but they cent and dollars are the things that count. Okay? In Midco, you can still rely on certain maneuverability from government because of the strategic role of Midco. But that, as I've said, that doesn't mean you can just let go, a laissez-faire type of management style. So this is what is happening. And there's always a place. Look at their development role, for instance. Who else is going to do the development? Nobody else. That's why you need something like Midco. And where they are involved in the north, they do good. Not the best, but they are still doing good. So there are opportunities where you can most probably push them in more to fulfill a larger role. But for the others who can stand on their own, just leave them that they can carry on. But you will still need farmers who are not there yet. The
last question on Midco, Vali, is who owns Midco? Because there's also this raging debate that never dies. Some people are saying it's a state entity, some saying no, it was snatched away from producers and stuff like that. Your understanding of that?
The short answer will be it belongs to nobody. That is why it's a total grey area.
Right.
That's how the act was constructed in the first place. It belongs to the members, but the members are not defined except in the 2004 amendment.
Yeah.
There they have it more specific, but they don't say you will be a member of MITCO. They say if you do the following, then you are a member of MITCO. Meaning this year you can be, next year you're out. So it's not like a company where you have shareholders. Here you've got, let's call it performance holders.
Yeah.
If you perform and you supply, you are a member. If you don't perform, you don't supply, you're out.
Okay. Wonderful.
So it's a very grey area.
Wonderful. Your take on a related subject, Vali, which is the red line. There's a call, or calls rather, from communities north of the red line, saying this is a tool that has been used to humiliate people, throw away people's meat even for domestic consumption. Even before testing that meat, whether it's infested or not, it's automatically thrown away. It's not allowed to pass, but meat from this side to the other side is allowed to pass. Of course, people like Joba Mpanda, Professor Joba Mpanda, who challenged this matter in court, he has lost the case. He seemed to be for the removal of this infrastructure, if I followed the case correctly. I am one of the advocates of the removal, but not of the physical structure. My own take is to deregulate the fence so that the infrastructure is important for our country. But the regulations that are used for it to function is where I have a bit of problems. Not a bit, I have major problems with that, especially throwing away people's food. Your take on that issue?
Okay, it's a pity we have such little time that I can explain everything to you, how it works.
Yeah.
Nobody said keep the veterinary cordon fence as is. There are 3 basic zones in the country. If you take the Old Caprivi, which is now Zambezi, that is endemic. And between the Zambezi and the other part in the north, you've also got gates. So basically, I won't say it's a dead lost, but it's almost a hopeless case to try and prevent FMD from that part. Then you've got the rest until we get the line itself. That's basically a buffer zone.
Yeah.
Should something happen there, you can prevent it from coming into the free zone. Now, in 1961, when the last outbreak of FMD occurred in the country, after that they even constructed 2 additional game-proof fences to every time have a buffer to stop before it gets to the rest of the country. Now, if you look at what is in place or on the table for what they can do. One, for instance, is if you look at the natural borders, first you've got the Kunini and the other one you've got the Kavango, where there's a natural border between us and the neighbor up north. But then you've got a portion in the middle where there's nothing. And Angola hasn't got a beef industry, they don't worry about that. And also some of the people, the cattle move to Angola during times when they've got grazing and not. Coming back where there's no veterinary supervision, they just bring FMD back to Namibia. Now you must remember, FMD can be carried. It's not necessary that the animal will get it. That is why they take away food, because it can carry that virus or whatever it is. And that is the harsh punishment, if I can put it to you that way. It's a carrier. That's why they spray your tires. You have to walk through water, etc., to sort of disinfect you, that nothing can come over.
Yeah.
But that's not hopeless. You've got an abattoir in Katima, which is an export abattoir. You've got a new one now in Rundu, which is an export abattoir. The problem is Oshikati, because of politics, etc., it doesn't get off the ground. It's there. It's got the facility to can beef. Why not? Because if it's cooked, it can move across the border. No problem. So the one idea is move the fence up from the Kunini's southern border up to the Kunini River, meaning Upuva and that area will then be open for cattle to move because you've got a natural border. The problem is that piece between us and Angola, but that's also not the end. You can also make compartments where you can say this compartment is free of FMD, so you can take it out. If you look at Botswana, for instance, as far as I can remember, they've got 19 of these lines.
The zone.
And of zones, yeah.
Yeah.
And one specific zone, if it's free, then it can move.
Yeah.
And the plans from the old meat board, they've got a long name now, is precisely to do that. You divide that part up into certain zones, and every one that's free from FMD for a certain period, then you can slaughter and etc. and move the meat. No problem.
Yeah.
But to just dismantle the fence, as you've said, the problem is the portion between us and Angola. And even if you erect a physical fence, they on the other side have got no interest to patrol even that. And then you must remember the old tradition from moving cattle up and down. What's going to happen?
Yeah.
Then you will, let's call it the natural movement of grazing during certain times of the year. Then you will prevent that.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's fair.
Yeah. No. That's the. For me, that has always been my idea. Anybody who follows especially my social media pronouncements, I've actually been talking about the compartments, the zones, where you split the country into zones, and whichever zone, if a disease is detected in one zone, you close it off for the necessary period of time, and then other zones continue to work.
Correct.
But for me, really, is to say that those zones must have the same destination as far as markets are concerned. Because now those of us who live north of the red line, we are told, no, go to Angola, go to Ghana. But we also want to export to the most lucrative markets that others in the southern part of the country are doing. So I think that the government should find a solution. Or maybe the focus of the court case was wrong. Maybe they should have said, order the government to create those zones instead of focusing on the existing structure. Because, in fairness, it serves a purpose. But we need an inclusive solution in the end.
Yeah, I think it's already on the table to do that through the old meat board once, and secondly through the Director of Veterinary Services, but I think they are hampered by capacity.
Yeah.
So in that case, it will not happen overnight. But yes, it's on the table, definitely.
Absolutely.
And if you can, even the World Organization of Animal Health do recognize those zones.
Yeah.
If under circumstances and patrolled by DVS and notes, etc., and they say, okay, it's clean, then the meat can go. So,
Absolutely.
but that's what they are working towards. It will come. It will come.
Okay. Now we hope it
Yeah.
comes and soon as practical as soon as is practically possible. But thank you, Wally, for making time. Really, I had hoped we could speak longer, but that is the only time that we had. But we appreciate your perspectives.
Okay, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, wonderful.
Thank you.
That is Wally Roo. He is, of course, a commentator and also, if you like, an expert in the space of agriculture, weighing in on the situation at Meatco as well as the red line. Thank you for watching.
Thank you very much.